Welcome, welcome. We have people joining us in the room, so we're just going to give it a moment here before we get started. We're so happy that you have chosen to join us today. This should be a really interesting session. We're going to be looking at AI meets admissions, real world results from a proactive recruitment tool. We have an amazing guest with us here today. We have Brent Benner. I think we are good. Let's just see a few more people streaming in. My name is Emily Pacheco, and I am one of the founders of the AI in college admission community. We are a recognized NACAC special interest group, and then we also have a website, edhub.ai, and that has amazing resources, and we are working to help our community learn how to navigate this new technology in an ethical and thoughtful way. And one of the things we do is try to bring guests to our audience who can educate us, who we can learn from their experience and learn from the cool things that they've done in the past and the things that they're thinking about and learning right now, and share that with our audience. So today, as I've already mentioned, I have Brent Benner here. Brent spent over 20 years as Associate VP of Enrollment at the University of Tampa. And during his time there, one of the things that he did was he oversaw the implementation of AI in their enrollment process. And during the last, part there, he integrated a proactive AI agent, and he used that agent and tracked the results really, really closely. So today, he's going to be sharing a little bit about that experience at Tampa, in hopes that we can all learn from the successes that he had there, as well as maybe learn from some of the things that didn't go perfectly. I expect there's a few people in the audience that are either in this process themselves at their, at their institution, or thinking about how they might begin this process of implementing AI in their enrollment office, in their admission office. Brent is now consulting with Small College Consulting, which is a hub of consultants that's focused on the needs of small universities here in the United States. Brent's going to share a short presentation that's going to show his experience and what he learned. And after that, we will leave time for some Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your screen, you should see that Q&A box. Please feel free to put questions in there. You can, ask them anonymously or put your name if your name is there. The audience does see that you've asked that question, and we will have a few minutes at the end to go over those. So, Brent, welcome. It's so great to have you today.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
And hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you here. And let's see here. Okay, how's that look? You can see that, Emily?
Yes, it has come on clearly, and you're good to go.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to talk about three things here today. I mean, obviously, you see the title of the presentation here, but what I hope you get from this is that you learn the basics of how to build and implement an AI agent, number one. And then number two, I'm a big believer in testing, so I'm going to show you how we uh, chose to test our AI agent's ability to influence behavior. And again, I'm looking at 17-year-old behavior, namely 17, 18-year-old behavior. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about other current applications of AI agents in college. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm as Emily mentioned, currently with Newman University. I'm interim AVP of undergraduate enrollment of Newman University, which is an awesome D3 school in Southeast Philly. So, and before I start here, I do want to give special thanks to Kevin Howlett, because even though I'm at Newman now, I'm going to be talking about our implementation of, we implemented three different AI agents at University of Tampa, but I'm only going to be speaking about our undergraduate AI agent that we use to try to increase inquiries and increase applications. And when I did this whole exercise with two colleagues, Greg Bowdler, who helped us set up a lot of the initial things. And then Kevin Howlett is the enrollment research and data analyst who I hired at University of Tampa, who's an awesome colleague. So he and I did the bulk of the work with respect to implementing and doing this test of an AI agent. So getting into the problem at University of Tampa, well, at a lot of places, is you buy all these prospect names and then they don't convert to inquiries or applications. So only about, as you can see there, a little less than 9% of our purchase prospect names really converted or inquired. So, and I do want to point out that this test I'm doing, when you think about the prospects we're testing this AI agent on, we buy names as early as their freshman year. So some of these students had not inquired for years. They've been getting our automated email track for years, yet they weren't converting. And most of them were months. So I don't want you to think these are brand new prospects that we got. These prospects had been out there a while. So that's who we tested them on. And I'll get into more detail there. And but essentially, we needed a communication alternative besides our e-communication U.S. Postal Service mailing track. And the volume we deal with I should say dealt with, since I'm not at Tampa anymore, very high volume. You can see that we push about 40,000 applications a year, only have 15 admissions counselors. So communicating with students, which are high, at the upper part of the funnel, wasn't something we were really very good at. So we're looking at this AI agent to help us with that. So I'm going to tell we utilized at the time, because I implemented this. This was implemented in December of 2024. So just about 13 months ago is when we implemented this, to give you a timeline of the study, which I'll show you. And we utilized College Vine's AI agent. Okay, so Halda and College Vine at the time both had good AI agents. I won't go into the details, but I thought the College Vines was a better one in terms of replicating a human's ability to speak, email, and text. Okay, because so that's what we're training this AI agent to speak, email, and text to prospective students and inquiries. So now we called you have to pick a gender, of course, for your AI agent. You have to pick a name, and we chose Tara, Tampa Artificial Intelligent Recruiting Assistant. You like that, Tara? So when we trained Tara, the first process was we scraped important university web pages using Python and uploaded that information to Tara, our AI agent. And so all that information, links, important information about anything with the university, majors, etc., support programs, was uploaded to Tara. So that's how Tara learned all that information about the University of Tampa. Then we conducted interviews with key, like student-facing personnel. You can see, obviously, admissions counselors, financial aid counselors. At Tampa, there's pretty good interaction with prospective students in terms of residence life, academic advising, registrar, career services. And these are pretty short interviews. These aren't long interviews where Tara asks questions. We tell Tara what to ask these particular personnel. And then, although College Vine recommended really only about 8 to 10 students, we used about 20 students. We have a pretty diverse student body at Tampa, so we had Tara interview various types of students. We have students from like 130 some countries, so we didn't have her interview a student from every country, obviously, but we did have her interview a number of international students. And then you have to interview for other student characteristics, such as gender, ethnicity, LGBTQIA plus, things like that, because a prospective student could ask your AI agent, hey, what's it like to be a gay male on University of Tampa's campus? Or what's it like to be an African American female and study at University of Tampa? So you have to, have students tell Tara or whatever AI agent you use what it's like to be whomever you are at the university. And then at the same time, you have to interview for what we like to call soft college info. Like we had Tara interview a number of students. What do students do off campus? What do students do on weekends? Is Tampa a suitcase school? Things like that. So that's what goes into interviewing for the student characteristics and the other soft college information. So once you test your AI agent, then you have to evaluate how it does. And College Vine was really the tester of our data. We had about 60,000 simulated questions. from various constituents. I'll show you some of the constituencies, but it's really everybody across your university that you could think of in terms of student groups like first generation students, athletes, etc. And then you grade and address problems for like wrong or vague answers, and then retest if necessary. But here's some of the like when you test Tara, you have to test the voice and tone, and I'll tell you how we adjust that. These are some of the other areas. You can see the helpfulness and safety, just making sure they're not dropping the F-bomb or anything like that. Uh, because you never know when somebody interviewed Tara, they could have dropped the F-bomb. When Tara interviewed somebody, they could drop the F-bomb. And then this is our grading. You can see how we were graded on these various areas. We overall we didn't have the highest grade that but we had a pretty good grade. I mean, the highest in terms of the history of college. Mine, I think 98 overall grade was their highest ever. I think we had a 97 overall. So we did pretty well by preparing. A lot of it is how much are you thinking this through? Are you preparing? Are you really teaching your AI agent? So if you do a good job of it, the testing phase, it's pretty easy. And you can see that I'm just showing you this for some other questions answered in various types of university students. And the one thing I do want to say, I want to give you a feel for what's a wrong answer. So we had probably more poorly rated answers. Well, a poorly rated answer during testing is essentially a wrong answer. So let me give you an example. For a transfer student question, and the question to Tara was, what's the lowest GPA that University of Tampa accepts for a transfer student? Well, we had never really told Tara what that was. So Tara during the testing phase, Tara would beat around the bush. Well, Tampa takes a holistic approach to admission, blah, 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 dancing around the question instead of answering it. So it was things like that, really kind of unclear or vague answers to questions. And it's easily solved because you just go in the portal, you say, 2.4 on the 4.0 scale is the lowest GPA. Solved. So there is a portal that you go in to correct whoever your AI agent is or to add additional information. Obviously, as I mentioned previously, you need to test the AI recruiter, or not test, but pick the AI recruiter gender and accent. I haven't seen a lot of male AI agents out there. They seem to be female. We just felt the female agent, we liked that better for representing Tampa. I also see some people do mascots. Seems a little awkward to me. We thought about it, but decided against it. And then you can adjust in the professional friendly scale. Most of us concurred on the voice to use because I mean, you can use an Australian accent, which sounded absolutely ridiculous, or you can have a lot of different accents, but we chose a fairly mainstream Midwestern female accent. But I think Tara was a little clinical, I want to say, a little bit more toward the professional side, not quite as friendly as we wanted her. So we moved the needle on the friendliness to get Tara where we liked her. And again, an AI agent can handle, I mean, it's just incredible when you speak to them. They can handle interruptions and conversation changes just like a human. In fact, they say AI agents will say exactly what humans do. Because whenever I interrupted, I tested Emily, not Emily Pacheco here, but Emily was the AI agent for Northeastern University. Northeastern was one of the first to implement an AI agent for admissions. They're very cutting edge. And when I tested Northeastern's, I could interrupt and like one of my colleagues, when she was testing, she asked, she said, do you have pre-med? And then so Emily started answering about the pre-med programs at Northeastern, and then she interrupted. She said, what about sororities? Do you have sororities? And Emily does just what a human does. She goes, that's a great question, Stacy. So rethinking, and then attacking the question wherever. So can also speak in many different languages. This has changed dramatically. I know there are more languages. You can see the fluency, and this was way back in December, a year ago in December. So Tara's fluency with texting or emailing or in all these languages, but in speaking, Tara had fewer at the time. But I know, for example, Korean is there are a lot more languages that College Vine offers. Not sure about Halda's AI agent. But and then you could be speaking English to Tara and switch to Spanish, and she'd flip right over real time without having to reset. She can change languages on the fly. So I'm a big believer in testing and offering some new endeavor to some prospects or inquiries or applicants, and then not offering it to others. So we decided for our target audience and goal, we would send an introductory email. That's how students first hear of Terra, and that's how most AI agents are set up. So you realize you're talking to an AI agent. You tell the person. So students would get an email from University of Tampa, where she would say, "Hi, I'm Tara, University of Tampa's AI recruiter. Would you have an interest in learning more about University of Tampa?" And then it would go one of a million ways, because Tara depending on the student information, the more Tara knows about you, the more she can do a segmented email to you. Now, this is something that I totally underestimated. I wasn't even thinking about, I was thinking about, the engagement of an AI agent and ability to answer questions, which is very important. But I didn't think about the fact that the first email Tara sends is a segmented email. You all know that's nearly impossible to write segmented email track to an undergraduate population. Graduate, you pretty much have to. But for undergraduates, like at Tampa, we have 200 areas of study. So writing 200, a segmented email track for 200 areas of study wasn't going to happen. And so, but what's nice about Tara is she already has every bit of information on our website. So when she would email a marine science student, she would not only be able to talk about all we've got going on marine science wise, but she would have helpful links to videos on our website, to student testimonials, to videos of research, to faculty bios and what they're doing research in. So again, the power of being able to write segmented emails unique to each student is really incredible, and probably one of the biggest sources of power, in my opinion, of implementing an AI agent. I'm going to show you some data on that here shortly. And then, again, it's dynamic. Not every email is the same. It's unique to each student. So whether or not Tara would call them or offer or make a phone offer or text offer really depended on the nature of the communication. So our goal was to get these prospects who hadn't inquired for months or years to inquire, obviously leading to more applications, more bandwidth regarding who to admit and enroll. So as you can see, everybody knows that if you want to do well in college admissions, it's a volume business. So you can see the volume we dealt with at University of Tampa. So all of these students, all of these prospects, while we implemented this study, were all getting our normal e-communication and snail mail communication. So all the 2026s, 2027s, and 2025 inquiries, which I'll talk about in a moment, they all got we didn't turn off our e-communication track at all. That kept going to all of them. So 125,000 of those 2026, in other words, last year's current juniors, they got the action to inquire, where Tara would contact them, tell them about University of Tampa, get them to try to get them to request more information, versus the other 125,000 we tested did not. As you can see, we're dealing in large volumes here. 60,000 of the 2027s, in other words, last year's high school sophomore class, same thing. 60,000 got Tara's offer, 60,000 didn't. And then just for grins, we decided it was very late in the process. We didn't implement this till December. And usually at University of Tampa, if you don't apply early decision or early action, in other words, prior to November 1st, you're typically not going to get in. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, of course, but generally late applicants do not get into University of Tampa. But just for grins, we wanted to try it on 20,000 of our 2025 IQs who hadn't applied by December. So again, 20,000, we gave the offer, 20,000, we didn't. We covaried, we do a lot of predictive modeling, so we covaried the predictive model scores to make sure that didn't muck things up. And then we didn't test Although we implemented Atera for graduate, those of you considering implementing for different populations, graduate or undergraduate, you will probably have to teach two uh, AI agents just because of the extreme differences between what grad students versus undergrads are looking for. And then in terms of our study, I'm going to get into the meat of our study here and show you the not only the statistical differences, but practical differences. So we did a randomized controlled study. As I mentioned in December, we split them equally and randomly into treatment control groups. And treatment group got the emails from Tara, the controlled group didn't. When it came to like which statistics, I'm not going to, I know this isn't a data science presentation. We're looking at more practical issues today. I assume most of you there are. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the specific design and our choice of what to use. But remember, most of what we're looking at an either or. In other words, inquire or don't inquire. We weren't looking at like four different behaviors, or we're looking at apply, don't apply. So when you're looking for binary things like that, you have to use different statistical methods. So we chose a two proportions z-test. You usually use z-tests with very high volume things. I come from clinical psychology, social science. Almost always we're using t-tests because our n was too small. But obviously our n isn't small here, so a z-test is appropriate. And then it's good to do a logistic regression model when you look at things just to make sure there's not some other variable accounting for the differences that you may not have thought of. Anyway, these tests would allow us to assess both statistical significance and practical relevance. So that's why we chose these two areas. So this is the data we used. Now, there are two things I'm going to refer to. I'm going to refer to our study, and at the same time, not in our study, we were getting inquiries from CollegeVine, and we were using we would email. We did have a communication track for all the prospects that turned in inquiries in CollegeVine. Okay, but those were separate. But I'm going to talk about that because there's something interesting there. I'm going to show you. But for our study, this was the data used, and you can see the require fields. Anybody who's thrown out who didn't have those four bulleted required fields, and again, not all our inquiries were from Encora. We don't Tampa, we didn't buy College Board. We bought only predictive model names, but we'd get inquiries from other sources. And then the supplemental data, again, the more data you have on your student, the more segmented an email they're going to get. So the data you have is important on your students. So this was some of the supplemental data that we had. So to look at our timeline, we started this effort mid-December, and then we took a snapshot. We stopped it hard on May 15th, the afternoon, May 15th, we stopped. And again, each lead got an initial email and several follow-ups in our treatment group. And you can see, again, it's dynamic content, but you could see some of the email topics and the calls to action here. By the way, I know that text is very small, but Emily had told me that there is going to be a YouTube version of this, and I'll also make the offer to send you a PDF of this if you'd like. I'll get my email at the end of this, so don't think I'm breezing over these the minutia that you can't see. You'll be able to see that if that's important to you. And then you can see these were the cumulative emails. Remember, some students are getting multiple emails, obviously. Many of them are getting multiple emails. So we had a pretty decent open rate. I didn't put our click-through rates here. They weren't the greatest, but our open rate was pretty good. Again, these are inquiries who have been sitting and not inquiring for months, if not years. And I already mentioned the two proportion z-test. We compared the treatment control group, and what that looks at the proportion of students, who convert to see if that is significantly different. And I already mentioned how binary outcomes, we use it for that. And then we also used a one-tail test, which is also one-tail tests are used for binary outcomes versus you'd use a two-tail test if you were looking at other outcomes. But that was our choice for there. And these are some of the results. You can see I mean, this isn't that helpful, but if there are any data nerds out there, I thought, that information is there on the YouTube and on the PDF. But I think this will be more helpful to you. So let's look at the applicants first, the IQs, the inquiries we're trying to get to apply. And you can see in our control group, we had 20,126. In our treatment group, we had 20,030. And you can see that the control group, 614, converted almost 100 more apps converted. And again, what's impressive about that is these are very late applicants who had been in inquiries for a long time and chosen not to apply. So a pretty tough group. We were able to get 100 more applications from very late in the game. So looking at the 2026s, the juniors, who you can see in our control group, pretty significant, about 400 some more inquiries Tara was able to generate than our control group. And then looking at our sophomores, again, pretty impressive especially when you look at the smaller N, that we got about 115 more to convert in our treatment group. So it was looking pretty good there. And so if we want to look at percentage improvement, we had a 15.6% improvement of applicants who hadn't inquired by December, a 33.7% improvement in our conversions of prospects to inquiries for our last year's juniors. And then for the sophomores, incredibly great yield for prospect inquiry, as you can see there. So the practical significance as well as statistical significance was significant. And then we also looked at the reason why you want to look at a logistic regression model is, again, to look at make sure that the change is based on your input variables rather than a continuous one. So we did this logistic regression, and then you could see here that it was highly statistically significant. The p-values are well below point. In fact, they were so small, it goes out to the thousands, as you can see in that p-value. So very significant. But again, what's the practical significance of it? That would be in that first bullet interpretation, that namely students who received AI recruiter emails did in fact have a 24% higher odds of converting than those who didn't, holding all those other factors constant. So these other factors weren't influencing this. This is, again, was giving credence to our study. And so what I want to show you something really interesting here. To me, this was the most interesting thing. So the students, now remember, this isn't our treatment group. These are just students who we would get emails from Tampa these were college Vine prospects who we emailed to, who weren't part of our study, but we tracked them. And as you can see, 5,300 of them inquired. But of the inquiries, 61% communicated with Tara. They wanted to speak with Tara. Now, in our e-communication to the college Vine prospects, it was up very high. The University of Tampa offer to speak to an AI recruiter was up high. Now, look what happens when you bury it. Like in our test group, we had all this segmented information about the cool stuff at University of Tampa within their major. And then at the end, we had the offer to speak to an AI agent. Look at the difference. Only 2% chose to communicate with Tara. So it shows the power of the segmented marketing email, that they would essentially jump. They would start reading the email and go to these links and have a high enough interest that they would jump and inquire even before speaking with Tara. So again, so on one hand, I remember when I saw this data, I thought, what a failure. Only 2.5% of my the treatment group talked to Tara. But that wasn't my goal, talking to Tara. My goal was to get them to inquire, which they did in a significant way, as I've already shown you. But this is very important for you to know, and it was important for me to know, that where I place that offer to speak with an AI agent is going to dramatically affect how many students take you up in the conversation. So anyway, that to me was extremely interesting. So I want to shift a little. Let's see, how am I doing time wise? Doing okay. I want to keep Emily, my friend, and if I stay on time, she's more likely to remain my friend. So I just want to look at, I know what Kevin and I talked about looking at long-term wise. Obviously, we're going to look, this treatment group, we're going to look at the effects of AI Recruiter on leads down funnel, the 2026, 2027s. So that will be very interesting for Kevin to track the conversion in terms of admit and deposit and enroll. You could also uh, uh, you could test the personalization effects. I mean, to some extent, we did. The different messaging strategies, where to put the offer to speak to Tara, using different types of content to see how that affects conversion. What Kevin was thinking of doing is introducing a third group which received non-AI personalized campaign. I mean, to some extent, I wish them good luck with that because again, you'd have to build a segmented e-communication track, which would be nearly impossible. So not impossible, but it'd be very difficult to pull out that future research extension. But that's what Kevin's going to be looking at, and hopefully he'll present on that in the future for us. So that's our study, and I've told you how to build an AI agent. I told you about how we tested it. But I want to talk about, I think, really where we're at right now. I mean, we know AI agents can influence behavior. We've proven that. But where else can we use an AI agent to help universities and students? So in addition to implementing graduate Terra and undergraduate Terra, I also had Terra the Evaluator. So, I already told you we have massive amounts of applications, typically 40,000 plus a year. And the biggest bottleneck for our evaluation team is we convert everything to an unweighted 4.0 scale. That's the most time-consuming thing. So we weren't using Terra, the evaluator, to evaluate like essays or do anything with application processing, but you definitely could. You definitely could use an AI agent to do that. We were only using our very narrow calculating GPAs for domestic and international transcripts. And she could also detect fraud, uh, uh, transcripts that look fraudulent. It was very important for us because we're test optional. We take a deep dive look at AP and IB coursework, and it's much easier to set up an AI transcript evaluator than it is an AI recruiter because of all those soft things. It's very narrow what you need an AI agent to do for transcript, uh, GPA calculations. But and the main failure we had like a 99% or a 1%, I should say, failure rate. And it was because of the P pass. Remember, we have those P's on transcripts because of the pandemic, and so we forgot to train Tara on to ignore P's. So that's why we had some wonky GPAs that didn't match our GPAs. I mean, it's pretty easy because we just took previously evaluated and converted GPAs, and we used those students to see how Tara did, how close Tara would come to our calculations. So that's one application of an AI agent. Universities often use them for events, for promotion and check-in. I think the most promising, and the thing that I'm most excited about for students is in academic advising and students having an AI agent tutor, because we all know the problem. Come week before midterms, week before finals, students try to get these. You know, they try to get appointments with academic advising to get tutored, and then they fill up and they can't. But of course, Tara, the tutor, could do 1,000 students at once at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I think that this is going to be a huge, massive benefit for students who are at universities who apply an AI agent to academic advising. And you can do a lot of different things for retention. I'm not going to get into a lot of those here, but the early warning detection, you could train an AI agent to do that. Financial aid counseling, the FAFSA verification, and really important, the student record updating. I forgot to mention that too, that if a student would change their major when talking to Tara, Terra would change, the major would get changed in Slate, and the information we did have some, some of the information uploaded to Slate. So so that's a big thing with FAFSA verification, student record updating. Um, Especially a lot of universities have to pay third parties to do FAFSA verification. We used to do that at Tampa. State financial aid assistance, deadline reminders. That's very important here in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania state grant, a lot of students uh, miss the deadline and pay a serious, like several thousand up to $5,000 per year cost for that. Likewise, in Florida, with the many Bright Future scholarships, you miss the deadline and you're really out of luck. So you could have a AI agent as providing deadline reminders, also award letter explanations, things like that. In development alumni relations, I think that first bullet is to me the biggest burden on development departments is to keep current with alumni data, career information, and the like. I've seen some really interesting things done with alumni networking to taking like all your alums who are in veterinary medicine right now and connecting them somehow. So you can do multiple things for alumni networking with careers, fields, etc. And then obviously I mentioned the event and promotions check-in. Athletics, the writing articles, us sports information directors have to furiously write articles and summaries of a sporting event. Again, an AI agent can do that very quickly, as well as come up with social media drafts. Career services, the mock interviews, the resume feedback works very similar to the essay. Some of you may have tested some of the essay AI tools for essays, which are very good and very powerful. But the mock interview thing is a great thing that career service groups use AI agents for. It's for residence life, it's a much more nuanced and analytical roommate matching than what's available in simplicity, excuse me, and a lot of the software. And you can get feedback on current students' housing information. And finally, and this is only, a slice of areas that where AI agents can be implemented. And but for financial and facility management, you may or may not want them to determine pay consistency and equity at your university. But it's very good at doing that. And then, of course, for facility management requests and things like that, it has some value there too. So, what conclusions can we make? One is that AI agents significantly increase prospect inquiry yield. Um, uh, it also affected inquiry to applicant yield. We also learned that the AI recruiter segmented marketing capability is, in my opinion, the most powerful aspect of implementing an AI recruiter. And then the email messaging significantly affects AI recruiter interaction. As I told you, where you bury or where you make the offer for various things. You can also, it's something I didn't mention, but you can kind of control that by limiting the number of words you want your AI agent to use in emails. You could limit your AI agent to 150 words. You could limit it to 200 words, and it would write an email within those parameters. So by making pithier emails, you could, perhaps influence things too. And again, there's multiple ways to enhance, various yield rates. We were only talking about here prospect to inquiry, inquiry to applicant. A lot of small universities utilize an AI agent to really affect admit to deposit behavior, or use it for deposit melt strategies. I'm sure you can see that it's the many different ways you can do that. And then obviously the quality of the data, the more data you have, the better. And that pretty much is what I wanted to cover today. And I think we've got about 20 minutes for questions. So I'm 5 minutes short, Emily. Sorry about
This
that.
is
But
great. No, no, perfect. That was perfect. And we have plenty of time for questions here. There is the email there, but I'm going to have you stop sharing that, Brent, and I will share your email in the chat here with everybody. And then if you do that, then everybody can see us again. Thank you so much for that, Brent. When I first heard about this, your experience there, I actually heard about this through a joint friend of ours, Myra Castro. She was really excited at seeing you present. And then I started looking into this work that you were doing. And I just think it's an excellent case study. And I think there's so many universities out there that are either starting to kind of think about this or even are already into the implementation process, but there just aren't a lot of universities that are out there talking about what they've done and sharing their experience with other universities. And I'd love to see more of these kind of case studies and more systematically and putting resources out there. And that's why we did this. We're just hoping that there's people here today or people that listen to this recording later that can look at this experience and say, this is something we're ready to try. And, we see what worked in what you did and go from there and maybe even be able to start at a more advanced point because they have these experiences that other universities have already gone through and they can kind of, hopefully not make some of the same mistakes and be able to implement it in a very thoughtful way. A question came in from one of our guests here, and it's a multi-part question. I think it's really great. I will read it. If you also, it might be helpful for you to read it as well there, Brent, in the Q&A. I'm going to read
You
all
don't
of.
think you don't
I'm
you
going to
don't think
read.
I'll remember it? You don't think I'll remember it
I
if you
know
say
you
it?
can try. It's a lot, but it's a few questions. Did interacting with Tara make these students go from an inquiry, make them an inquiry, or was an additional action needed? So if they interacted with Tara, did that make them an inquiry, or did they actually have to do something else before, in order to be qualified as an inquiry? And if an additional action was needed, how much do you think that the novelty of Tara was a factor in this engagement? So in other words, do you have reason to think that engagement would continue throughout the application process beyond just that initial, interaction with Tara? Or do you think that, Tara kept helping with that student? And I know you did mention that, this is taking us from inquiry, from prospect to inquiry and even inquiry to applicant. You showed that data. We haven't yet seen how that results into, deposits and enrollments. And I would love to have you back once we have that data and share kind of how this all pans out. But
Mhm.
could you kind of address those questions that Trevor had?
Sure, that's a great question because these people weren't clicking on anything. So yes, by nature of clicking on that email and engaging with Tara, that made them a inquiry.
Okay.
So now the down funnel things, remember, uh, those I don't really know of right now, but that's one thing Kevin is going to be looking at, that engagement down funnel. And this, I think this would help a little too for you to, because many people, when they're conversing, going back and forth with Tara, emailing, they'll say, actually, could I talk to a live admissions counselor? So that happened. And then Tara, so you have to make your admissions staff know of your endeavor, of course. Otherwise, they're going to say, who the heck is Tara and why is she sending students my way? So yes, and the counselors really thought that was convenient too, because they already could see some conversations that the student was having in Slate and then therefore pick it up
Mhm.
as a human.
That was actually the next question here was about kind of the interaction with the humans in your office, because, I know there is a big concern from a number of people in these enrollment offices that this agent is going to then take up the place of, your on the ground staff. I mean, you mentioned the number of applicants you had and that you have 15 enrollment, admission representatives there. And that's a very small number of people to process that many applications. So I assume that you're not looking to kind of downsize there. But did this kind of talk a little bit about that? Was there a connection between Tara and your humans on the ground? And did they find, if they found this useful? Did they feel threatened by this? Or maybe a little bit about the implementation? Maybe that had to do with the way you told them, what this was about right up front. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Remember, these were students that weren't engaging anyway, right? So, I mean, the counselors would never know the difference until they got an email from Tara saying, "Hey, so and so would like to have a conversation with you," or "So and so would like you to email you." So no, they found it helpful. I think they found it interesting, but most of this was kind of like a side project for Kevin and myself, because to some extent, unless they raised their hand and said, I wanted to speak with the counselor, counselors really weren't, I guess, paying attention much to what was happening. Of course, some of the IQs turning into applications could eventually be speaking to them. But I do want to address the kind of the fear of AI replacing humans, and I think it's a real fear. I think it's a valid fear. Um, like I think for entry level people, it's really going AI is really going to affect entry level things. We've seen that with computer science. But interestingly, my youngest daughter is a threat hunter. She's a cybersecurity. She's has her degrees in cybersecurity, and she's a threat hunter. And she told me that entry level jobs, even in cybersecurity, are getting a lot more difficult to get. And that she told me, she said, although she did take an AI class when she graduated from Tampa, and I think she graduated the year of the pandemic, 2020 or 2021. But she said that the whole playing field has changed now for entry. She said, I'm so glad I'm not an entry level cybersecurity person now. It would be a lot harder to get a job. So I think that is real. And let me give you an example. Where it did kind of affect, I didn't have to lay anybody off at Tampa, but I have a team of evaluators, and they work part-time. A lot of them are retired, admissions professionals, of course. But in my evaluation team, because I implemented Tara, the evaluator, taking up this massive amount of time that humans would have to do calculating GPAs, I did have a counselor who, not a counselor, an evaluator who quit over the summer, and I just didn't replace that person.
Mhm.
So I talked to my head evaluator. So it affected one spot at Tampa, even though I didn't really lay anybody off. That was one less position I had because of Tara, the evaluator. So I think this is real, and this is going to it'll be incredibly disruptive.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to be able to see that data of, of how many of those conversations converted to conversations that then required a human. Because I would assume there were a number of conversations that, would get to a deeper point, and then it would be good to, bring in a human. And maybe in those offices it would make sense where that, that position that you didn't rehire for might be your 16th admission representative, because I could see actually, more inquiries from prospective students who were not interacting before would result in some additional conversations and some additional more deep level work, from those on the ground admission representatives. So I know
Yeah, but
that's a big concern in offices. I haven't met a dean of enrollment who's telling me that they want to get rid of, their on the ground staff. They really want to keep them engaged, but they are hoping that they're not, translating, looking at transcripts and just evaluating those, doing, work that can be done by AI. Let's give them work that's more meaningful and more, deeper connected to prospective students. Right.
yeah, related to this, it was interesting. Yesterday, I had a conversation with the president of Newman University, Chris Domes, and the CEO of Educational Dynamics. I don't know if all know of Education Dynamics, a great company, but Brent Ramden and Dr. Domes and I were having a conversation, and we were all agreeing that at some point, very near down the road, it may become a luxury to speak to a human, that you're doing most of your work through AI agents, and you get instead of getting an offer to speak to an AI agent like it is now, you may get an offer to speak to a human.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a few places like when I'm trying to make a medical appointment that I really wish that system was already in place. I mean, I don't know why I'm still on hold for 20 to 30 minutes to, just to book an appointment or, I think there's a lot of places that would be very helpful. And then, yes, and give me that option, make it
Mhm.
so I can talk to a human. But if it's something simple that that the system can answer, yeah, by all means, let's do that. One interesting thing is I think there's some interesting byproducts of these agents, and some, obviously some could be negative, but I heard of a positive one, and this made me, think. I heard of, when you implement these agents, you mentioned how Python is, looking through all of your web pages and scraping that information, and then that's what the answers are based on. Well, I heard that in the testing phase, all of a sudden they noticed like these really wild answers that were coming out of, the pretty easy questions. And what they found was it was tracked back to wrong information on their websites. And a
Hmm.
lot of times this was information that had been up for, a long time, but it was just erroneous information, and there weren't the people there to do that check. And so it actually helped this university update a lot of information on their web pages, and really kind of helped them completely revamp what they had available there. And they said it did make it a more time consuming process, but in the end that was necessary and something that they really needed to do, even, should have done sooner. But that was just kind of an unexpected byproduct of that. Did you have that experience, or were there any other kind of, things that occurred that you weren't expecting in this process?
Yes, there is, but I mean, not what your other colleague experienced. We had I guess I was extremely fortunate in that we had migrated to a new website about 6 months before. So we had a very clean, we're scraping very clean content when we scraped the website at the time. But what happens is, okay, let's say we scraped it from our website and our average class size was 21. But when Tara starts interviewing people, they start saying, "Hey, our average class size is 20. Hey, our average class size is 22. Hey, our average class size is what?" So we did put some rules in there that website trumps interviews. So any information gleaned from the interview, the website would trump. So you can do these if-then statements. If, you know, this isn't equal to this, basically, website trumps human interview. So yes, we did have that happen during the testing phase.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. And I do also just want to share another example that I had heard and this was from a university in the Bay Area, where they used these agents to really bring in more Pell eligible students. So they had noticed that Pell eligible students had kind of fallen off in the conversation as soon as those financial aid packages went out. And what they assumed was happening was these students were opening these financial aid packages, seeing, a very large number that they had, to pay, and then they were stopping that conversation. And most of the time it meant they didn't quite understand that that wasn't the final package, that there was, there were different options. And sometimes that financial aid package got it as low as $5,000 to $10,000 that they had to pay. But for a Pell eligible student, even just kind of understanding how they're going to pay for that small amount, they just didn't know how to navigate that. And so they actually implemented an agent that was specific to that for those students. And they really targeted those students and said, to try to answer those questions, and the questions that the parents of those students would have too, offering it in multiple languages, and made it very accessible, and did a whole campaign where this was sent out to students, and right kind of timed it along with that financial aid package. And their results were really impressive, that those students stayed
Oh,
engaged, and they actually tracked that data all the way to enrollment. And they had many more of they had, a higher percentage of Pell eligible students who actually enrolled. And they were right in that kind of suspicion that those questions about that financial aid package just weren't getting answered early enough. And so they were dropping off, of that engagement. So I just wanted to share that. I was really
oh
impressed with
yeah.
that usage.
No, because the nuanced way to answer questions and the consistent way to answer questions is just what's great about an AI agent. Like if I gave the same presentation tomorrow, I may leave things out, right? But if I was an AI agent, I would give you the same presentation. I give you the same info. And probably the hardest area of admissions counseling is helping families digest and understand their financial aid package. In fact, I mean, although I know that good admissions counselor departments, they're trained as de facto financial aid counselors too. But this way, you're giving really good advice to parents on things that are of critical importance. That's where the rubber meets the road. The award package. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
I
great.
think it's a really good point you bring up there of just consistency of service.
Mhm.
I've worked in an office with 20 admission counselors, and there were a number of those people that I don't think I would have trusted with, I just, and even myself after the 15th, 20th, 25th call of the day, trying to show that level of interest and delving deep with that student, it takes a toll once you've done that for hours and hours. And in the spring, that's right now, January, February, March. I mean, that's what I was doing basically basically, almost full time. I've done that for an institution, and it really wears on the admission counselor. And so, being, a dean of admission and knowing that all of those conversations can have kind of a level of consistency, and then once it gets to that deeper level where the student needs to connect with a person that can seamlessly be passed along, and then that admission representative having that information. Okay, this is already what's happened, this is the conversation that took place, this is kind of the point where we're at that conversation, and being able to jump in there just seems so much more efficient, and time efficient, but also just a way better customer
Yeah.
service, really, in the end.
That's kind of what sold me. That was the final straw that sold me on implementing an AI agent is when I tested Knox College, which is a small private university in Galesburg, Illinois. Knox was a very early adopter, and they do very different things than what we at Tampa utilize it for. But when I asked their AI agent before, when I was testing theirs, because I just tested theirs and Northeastern's, but I probably one of the toughest questions for admissions counselors to get right now at a college fair. It says, "I know your te-" So I asked it this. I said, "I know your test optional, but I took the SAT. How do I know whether to send it to Knox College or not?" And she gave the most nuanced, direct answer that told me exactly when I should send it or not. And I thought, this is awesome. I thought, I have no idea what my admission counselors say when they're asked that, but I want them to say that.
Yeah, you don't know how many times I've heard answers to that question standing next to somebody else, and I'm going, I have no idea myself. Like if I would submit, and I've been in that situation too, where I wasn't quite sure how to clearly answer that question or
Mhm.
not. So yeah, it's worth a lot to have those clear answers in that. We are coming close to the end here. I do want to just point out to our guests that there are a lot of links that I shared in the chat. You can find Brent's email there. You can find the link to the Small Colleges Consulting. There's also a couple links to webinars that are coming up. We talked about the transcript reader. We have it's actually not our own. This is just one of our, somebody that a great, My Docs is putting on a webinar later this month, and there's a link there. They're one excellent tool that does that's in using AI in the transcript review process. We also have an AICA webinar this Friday. We're going to be welcoming Collegio. They are a very interesting tool that's used to help college counselors manage the college recruitment and application process. So please, you can sign up right there. And I'm sure most of you are already part of our community on LinkedIn, but I did also share the link there for that as well. Brent, I would like to ask you, what do you think about AI readers in the essay review process? And I know that wasn't what today was about, but this is kind of coming up as a conversation piece. And I just am very intrigued by Virginia Tech is now using one of their AI readers or one of their application readers, essay readers is an AI agent, and then they will also be using a human reader in the process. And this is the first year that that's going live. They've run a number of test cases in the previous years, and this year is their first kind of implementing that. What do you think about that?
I have a different take on the college essay than most people in my area. I kind of use the essay. I mean, some people use the essay as like a writing sample or an example of how well a student can write. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Why would you do that when you have a transcript? I can look at highest level of English taken.
Hmm.
Okay, they took AP English Lit and got a 5, and they took AP English, got the 5. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know their essay. But I think essays are good for me because I find really incredible students through incredibly written essays, or I find major red flag students who use the essay as like a projective technique in talking to their therapist or somebody like that. So I use AI to kind of flag kind of odd students that I'm not sure or have much to add to the student body, or use it as a flag for these incredible students who you may not realize for their transcript how great they are. So I'm fine with that.
I
have no
think
problem.
you just bring up a great point there. I just think for the essays, that's not the place for us to gauge how good a student is writing, and not just because of AI. I mean, students have been using, that is such an edited process. They're working with many of them are working with a writing coach who's helping them in very ethical ways. But that end result really isn't an accurate representation of their writing skills. And exactly what you can glean from that is kind of some additional traits about the student. And to me,
Mhm.
I agree. It seems like AI does well at that of, pulling out even nuances that humans could miss. And so I'm really excited to see kind of what happens this year with Virginia Tech and how that turns out for them in that experience. So um, coming to the end here, if you're interested in learning more about what Brent has done at the University of Tampa, please reach out to him. The recording will be placed on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe. I put the link in there. It'll be up there in a couple days. So share that widely with anybody that you think might be interested in this. And thank you, Brent. Thanks so much for sharing. This is really,
Sure.
realizing I should have put like case study in the title because this was just an amazing case study. And we'd love to, have more universities on and talk about their experiencing implementing AI in the admission process like this. So thanks for kind of leading the way. And hopefully we'll see more of these case studies in the coming months, coming years. Have a great rest of your day to all of our attendees. Thanks for attending. And we'll see you at future AICA events soon. Bye.
Sounds good. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks.
Bye now.